welcome to the Total Soccer Show and the glorious return of our news and catch-up show that we like to call The Bulletin. On this episode, we're looking at why Jose Mourinho is embroiled in a racism storm in Turkey, which NFL team is investing in a Scottish mega club, and we're looking at Darwin Nunez' future at Liverpool. My name's Ryan Bailey. Today, I'm catching up with Mr. Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan. Celtic are getting new investors? I thought it was Rangers.
No, it's Sterling Albion. Didn't you hear?
Oh, yes, of course.
I said mega club. Yeah.
Yes. I have a Rangers shirt, and I'm already making fun of them. I feel bad about it. I don't.
Graham Rutherford, hello. How are you?
I'm good, Ryan Bailey. I'm better now that I've learned we're being bought by... What was the name of the team? The 69ers? Was that
59ers.
59ers, right.
We'll take 10 away from that, please. Yeah, at least 10.
I'm borrowing that from a Scottish football phone-in this week where someone got the name of the team wrong and said that. And, laughter ensued on said radio phone-in, and it's gone viral. I enjoyed it a lot.
Oh, boy. Very good. Joe Lowry, hello.
Yeah, this might come off a slightly holier than thou, which is, I guess, not entirely the different intention. I did watch a couple of, Scottish fan reaction videos to this Rangers 49ers news, and I watched it for a few seconds, and I thought, yeah, that's enough for me. And then I kind of moved on to other forms of research. I didn't quite get to the college show that you listened to, Graham, but we moved past some of those quickly and went to other places.
Why was it enough for you immediately?
To be honest, there was a little bit of language barrier that I was struggling to understand what the speech was. And one of the videos, I think, was titled on YouTube, The Top 10 Reasons Why the 49ers Takeover is going to be great for Rangers. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. They're clearly coming at it from a certain perspective. But the very first thing what this person said was, because they'll sack the manager straight away. And I was like, all right, well, I'm done with this. We can move on. We'll go somewhere else.
Well, that happened. They did it on Monday, so they're already ahead of the game.
Great work.
Can I hear more of that accent, Joe?
We can't win anything with this lad. I don't know, something along those lines.
It's like Shrek himself.
I know.
To be clear, it wasn't the accent that I had a real problem with. It was the analysis, and I thought, I'm good.
Wonderful stuff. We're going to get into the bulletin very shortly, but before we do, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is the best way to support this here endeavour. Please, and thank you to everybody who does so. We've got bonus episodes on there, bonus video content, and access to our Discord server on the feed this week. You will find us discussing the new MLS doc Onside. It's not offside. It's not Harry Maguire getting controversial goals. It is onside.
That's me doing the flag.
We're on board.
Why we got to take shots this early in the show? Come on.
Sorry, Taylor.
I don't talk about how Charlotte is a garbage city and John Mayer's garbage musician. That doesn't hurt, come on.
You're welcome to.
And also, you do that on a fairly regular basis.
Never. Charlotte's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's
He's actually hurt.
You've ever said about Charlotte. Very good. All right. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Let's get into it, shall we? Can we get into the story, if we can, about Jose Mourinho? Galatasaray have accused the Fenerbahce manager of making racist statements following their goalless draw in the Turkish Super League earlier this week. Speaking after the Istanbul derby, Mourinho apparently said from the home bench, he said the home bench had been jumping like monkeys. Galatasaray board member Kan Natan, a quote from him, Jose Mourinho's systematic derogatory comments about the Turkish Super League, Turkish referees, and the Turkish nation since his employment in Turkey are increasingly concerning. His recent remarks following the derby match between Galatasaray and Fenerbahce, in which he stated Galatasaray's bench was jumping like monkeys, are not only insulting but also illustrate a troubling pattern that crosses the borders of racist behaviour. Graham, sources close to Mourinho say that Mourinho's been angered by these allegations. He's assessing his legal options. I'm getting these quotes and this from the BBC's report of the situation. Folks like Didier Drogba have weighed in Mourinho's defence as well. What's going on with this situation?
Yeah, so obviously this has become a bit of a mess. Ryan, I'm not sure if you mentioned it in your quote, but one of the statements from Galatasaray said that they plan to initiate criminal proceedings against Jose Mourinho and shall accordingly submit official complaints to UEFA and FIFA. So this has become quite serious. I think what is I mean, look, it's not really clear what pattern Galatasaray are referring to unless they're talking about some of the disparaging comments Mourinho has made about the quality of the Turkish Super League this season, which I think I think that's a bit of a reach to then say that's racist behaviour. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, my thoughts on the monkey comment is I just wouldn't describe anyone in a public setting as a monkey. I'd just stay away, or monkeys. I'd stay away from that. But it does kind of feel like this is my own opinion here. I think it feels like a little bit of a reach by Galatasaray, and perhaps the important context is this has been a to and fro between Galatasaray and Fenerbahce going back like 18 months. Last season was complete chaos. We had the referees strike. We had, it was Fenerbahce, right, Taylor, who threatened to leave the Turkish Super League because they said the referees were biased against them. This match was played on a Monday night rather than at the weekend because they anticipated crowd trouble. It also had a foreign referee because both teams requested a foreign referee because they don't trust the Turkish, the native referees. So I think that's some important context there, and it does kind of feel like maybe Galatasaray are weaponising something that, look, is certainly far from ideal. An apology from Mourinho would certainly go a long way, but I think that context of what Turkish football is like right now is rather important.
Which is where the disparaging comment towards the official comes from, right? Because he basically, I think he was saying he went in to thank the Slovenian official for neutrality and for calling a good game. His quote was, "I went to the referee's dressing room after the game. Of course, the fourth official was there, a Turkish referee. I told him, thank you for coming here." This is to the Slovenian ref. "You come for a big match." I turned myself to the fourth official and said, "If you were a referee, this match would have been a disaster." And I think that is, harsh language towards an official. At the same time, when he was critical of English referees, I don't think the English ever said, "Oh, he hates the English." I think he gets annoyed with officials, which most coaches do. I agree with you, Graham, that I think at the very least from an American perspective, I don't think calling anybody monkeys is a good idea. I think there's always going to be sensitivities there that it's best to avoid, but I also don't think he intended it in the way that Galatasaray have taken it. From like people I have spoken to, I think the general sentiment has been it's like unfortunate phrasing, but it's clearly unintentional. And I think Didier Drogba, for example, kind of echoed those sentiments. I personally feel like this is Galatasaray, and I'm a Galatasaray supporter. I feel like this is them deliberately blowing this out of proportion to make him the villain, to make him look very bad. And then there's also comments about like Fenerbahce have supposedly taken a strong stance against racism and bigotry, and we'll be very interested to see how they respond to this racist incident. And it feels like Galatasaray kind of attempting to establish we have the moral high ground, we are the superior club who doesn't allow for things like this, and look what Fenerbahce are permitting. But I think that is pretty bad, honestly, of Galatasaray to kind of play upon genuine issues in football and in global society and kind of, in my opinion, using an actual issue to kind of make themselves look better, when I do think they are taking it out of context and to some extent deliberately misconstruing what's being said, and then threatening a lawsuit, and then Mourinho threatening a lawsuit, and Fenerbahce threatening a lawsuit. Everybody's suing everybody, and it's going to get even messier.
We haven't mentioned Didier Drogba's comments. He said he insisted the Portuguese is not racist. The quote, "How can my dad be a racist? Come on, guys."
I thought you were going to refer to the point of his tweet where he forgot to put in the number of years that he'd been working under Mourinho, which clearly had come from an agent, or maybe even Mourinho himself. Who knows? Maybe that's been sent to him by Jose Mourinho, but he put in XX years. But yeah, the dad thing was a little bit peculiar.
Graham, are you implying that former Phoenix Rising superstar Didier Drogba doesn't put out excellent social media copy on his own, entirely on his own? I will not stand for this.
That might be my suggestion.
Yeah,
yes.
it said I have worked with Mourinho for XX years, right? I think it was later filled in as like.
It's to imply
years.
20 in the Roman numeral style.
Exactly, it's Roman numerals. That's what he was doing.
Right, and 20 is more meant to be like this infinite connotation. Yeah, 100%. 20,
25. This is rounding down.
Ish.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. All right,
I tend to take like players waiting in as Drogba did with a grain of salt, because like Shane Gillis has the joke about racism and how it's not really a like you are or you aren't thing. It's a conditional thing, much like being. I think he compares it to hunger. That like it can pop up, and so I think like Drogba saying I've never seen that type of behavior doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. In the same way that one person coming in and saying like I've never heard a person say this or do that doesn't mean that they haven't like in another incident. at the same time, I do think it's important to note that Drogba coming out against his former club to say, like, come on, guys, you know that's not what he meant. I do think it carries a little bit more weight because he is coming from a Galatasaray perspective, but defending his former manager. So I do think it adds a little bit of weight in that regard.
Yeah. I think, Taylor, overall, is it fair to say that Jose Mourinho has been something of a nuisance presence in Turkey in many respects?
You mean everywhere, always, constantly?
Everywhere.
That's his whole thing?
But I mean,
Yeah.
he seems to have taken pleasure in riling things up a little bit with his social posts, where he did the Portuguese handball team, where he did that quite relatively humorous post about their successes when it was relating to an incident in a game. He's not made himself. He's not a wallflower exactly in Turkey, is he?
No, he is not. And I do think that is the heart of the matter, in my opinion. I think you could see it in Galatasaray's statement. Like, Turks are an intensely proud people and proud of their nation. Everybody has patriotism. Turks, in my experience, took it to a new level. And I think that is what it is. Anytime you are kind of publicly disparaging the league, disparaging officials, disparaging other coaches or players, like I think that is sort of what is the root of the issue for Galatasaray. And for a lot of people who I think like Turkish football or are proud of their Turkish roots, they don't love a manager coming in, a very high-profile manager coming in and publicly disparaging the league and some of the teams. And so I think that is where some of this is coming from, is there's a perception of, oh, he doesn't like Turkey, oh, he doesn't like Turks. I don't think that's true either, but I think that's how this is being spun to then make it a bigger issue than I would say it is.
Mm. And I don't the jumping like monkeys comment. I don't think he's denied saying it, but
No,
I don't know.
he hasn't. He said it himself, I think.
But which language did he say it in? I don't know if there's any kind of nuance there. Possibly.
I believe it was in English. I think I've seen the footage of this, and it was in English.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure he gets a hall pass in that respect then. But certainly this one we'll rage on. I don't know if anyone else has anything more on this one before we head on to our next topic.
I guess I don't feel the need to weigh in on everything, especially when I feel like a lot of things have already been said. The one thing that I will just reiterate is, like Graham said it right off the top, I just don't think that this is the sort of thing that you should say, even if I think there's absolutely other context that has followed all of this. And I would think that there's been a lot made of it and there are other political things in play, but just don't do this. And I would probably apologize about it. So,
yeah.
At the risk of taking us down an awkward path, I agree with you, Joe, fully. It is difficult when you, I guess I would say don't understand the context or don't understand historical significance of certain words. Because we've gotten emails from people talking about when we say the nitty gritty, how that can have connections to slavery, and I think calling a spade can do the same. And even if I were to say right now, oh, Mourinho slipped on a banana peel, is that it's difficult to know truly what is going to offend, because different things can offend in different cultures in different countries. And I think that's where you have to look at the person themselves. And I think that's where Mourinho gets himself into trouble a little bit, is that he doesn't shy away from confrontation or conflict. And I think can say confrontational things and can say pretty confounding things, but I don't think I've ever heard him say anything that I would say comes away as bigoted or racist. And so I agree with you. You should be mindful of what you say, and when you know that, it did make me, as soon as I read that, I was like, that's not a good thing to say. But you can also understand how he wasn't saying it towards a bench that was entirely black players. I think that would have made a very big difference. Or if he said it to one individual player who was black, it would then take on massively different context. It's just a very difficult situation, as all conversations about race tend to be.
Absolutely so. The one thing I don't think I've ever heard Mourinho say, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Has he done that before?
Oh, he's definitely on I'm sorry your feelings were hurt guy. I'll say that.
I'm sorry, I'm so good.
I'm sorry,
I think
you're
he
wrong.
might have said.
All right, more on this story when we get more information on it. It clearly is an ongoing situation. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about Darwin Nunez and his role at Liverpool. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, we're with you with the Bulletin. And we're going to talk all about Darwin Nunez for the next few minutes. Arne Slot, Darwin Nunez manager this week's, had some words to say, Graham, about the forward. I wasn't only hard on him, he said, but for the second time in a row, I wasn't happy with his work effort, he said of his most recent appearance against Wolves and Aston Villa. I can't accept if a player doesn't give everything, that is clear. I can accept it once, but twice was a bit too much. That's why I addressed it. Graham, is this the beginning of the end for our famous calamitous for our favourite calamitous Liverpool forward.
It kind of feels like it. So basically, this actually started after Darwin Nunez missed an absolute sitter against Aston Villa. Was that last week? There's so much soccer happening at the moment that it's difficult to keep track. I think that was last week. It finished 2-2. And look, it's a golden opportunity. What makes it so notable is he misses it by basically sending the shot into like the top tier of the stadium. It's comical. He basically just blasts it into the stand. It's a classic Darwin Nunez moment. And so Arne Slot is asked about the missed chance after the game. You know, how unhappy are you with Darwin Nunez? And basically he says, he does his Joe Lowry bit of saying he was pleased that Darwin Nunez keeps getting into good positions, but then makes this interesting comment about his work rate, and basically saying that after that missed chance, he lost interest in the game, and that was the part that he wasn't happy with. Then he's doubled down on this earlier this week on Tuesday in his press conference, said the things that you outlined there, Ryan. And then James Pearce and Greg Evans reported for The Athletic on Wednesday this week that Liverpool would entertain selling Darwin Nunez in the summer. There was interest in him from the Saudi Pro League in January. They didn't want to lose him mid-season when they're going for the Champions League title and the Premier League title, because they felt it would be difficult to get a replacement. Obviously, the situation could be different in the summer when it might be easier to sign a top-level centre-forward. There's a whole load of other reporting outside The Athletic that is going to be a position that Liverpool prioritise in the summer transfer window, is getting a new number 9 in. So, those two things have sparked a whole lot of debate around Darwin Nunez and what his future is at Liverpool. I think he's still their record signing, right? They paid a whole lot of money for him. So there's always been debate and discussion around Darwin Nunez, and I have always kind of defended him, but it does sort of feel like he's at a crossroads in his Liverpool career.
I agree, Graham. At the same time, it does feel like there is context being sort of like left out of the headlines, like Slot then saying yesterday he was incredible in training when it came to his work rate. Hopefully he can keep doing this, and whenever the team needs him, then he is ready for it if he keeps putting himself in sessions like he did yesterday. Like, I think Slot, and I think he was very careful to say strikers miss chances, like that happens. You can't lose your focus, and that did happen, and so we want to see him have a response. And I think the stats would back up that Nunez did. I think in his substitute appearance, he like lost possession way too much and wasn't sort of making runs that he was expected to, and I think did let his head go down. And I think Slot was saying it's the second time it's happened, and so when it's the second time, you got to kind of call it out and see what the response will be. But I don't think that that means I've seen stuff that's like Slot says he must be gone and Liverpool actively shopping him, and I think that is sort of papers trying to sell papers at a time when Liverpool seem like they're going to stroll to the title. You have to kind of have conflict. You have to sow seeds of discord to potentially have a narrative going forward, and I think that might be some of this. I don't think Nunez has been the striker that they hoped he would be when they signed him for that record amount, and so I think there is a little bit of truth that he was, from what I have read, a Klopp signing, that Klopp pushed for him, that Klopp wanted him to be the replacement for Firmino, that the Liverpool analytics department, scouting department, preferred Christopher Nkunku, I think is what I read, but ended up signing off on Nunez. And so there's an idea that maybe he is a final Klopp guy, maybe he doesn't fit the system, maybe he doesn't play the false nine role that they needed him to play to replace Firmino, so maybe somebody else can do that a little bit better. But I don't think we've seen the last of Darwin Nunez in a Liverpool shirt, I'll put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've touched on something, Taylor, in that Liverpool are 13 points clear at the moment. Are we just trying to get some narrative out of the best team in the country at the moment? We're trying to find that little Achilles heel, if there is one. I
think so, because I think in at the same time as these articles were populating for me, my feed also had are Liverpool too reliant on Mohamed Salah? What happens when they lose this guy? Will they keep Trent Alexander-Arnold? How can they keep him? It just feels like there is a need to sort of write about Liverpool but not have it be constantly glowing praise and how have they done this and how has Slot been so good. I think in the desire to have some level of balance, I think you end up finding stories to write, and Nunez not scoring on an open goal is pretty good fodder.
Yeah, I think that's true, although again this just isn't about the miss. I think it's notable when a manager, especially at a high-level club, calls out a player not once but multiple times. That doesn't, at least in my experience, and I haven't covered Liverpool, breaking news, on the ground. I haven't covered a lot of big clubs on the ground, but in my experience, talking with coaches and being in press conference settings and asking questions, coaches are very hesitant to do exactly what Arne Slot has done here, not just once, but multiple times. I also think maybe this is content brain activating for me, and maybe I shouldn't be this way. I think it absolutely makes sense to look to the future for Liverpool, because there are big questions that need to be answered here. And what happens to their most expensive player ever is a really big question, because to go all the way back around, and this has been said already, but to emphasize, to go back around, Darwin Nunez has not been a success at Liverpool. He has been chaos incarnate, and it is so much fun as a neutral, but he's not become a regular, in-pen starter in the way that you would hope that a player that you spend that much money on would be for you. He has continued to underperform his XG and seems genuinely at a loss at times in front of goal. And I am not one who says that lightly, typically. It's been an unsuccessful stretch at Liverpool for Darwin Nunez. I'm curious, Graham, with that in mind, and with me thinking it's absolutely fair to look to what's next for Liverpool, because there are big questions there. What happens to Darwin Nunez? If we think that an exit is a real possibility, I know Saudi discussions have been reported. Is that the spot? Liverpool don't like to take baths on transfers, mostly because they don't miss on a lot of transfers in the way that other big clubs do. Is he going to go to Saudi? Is he going to go somewhere else? What happens here?
I think he goes to Saudi if they put 50 million euros on the table and they say to Liverpool, right, there's a huge chunk of the money that you invested in this player, and who else is going to do that?
Probably Manchester United.
Well, so that's. I mean, would that happen if Manchester United put down 50 million and said, "Give us Darwin Nunez"? Would Liverpool sell? Are they so professional? Are they so well run, Liverpool, that they would say, "Here you go, Manchester United. Here's a player we don't want"? Or does the rivalry come into that? I know this is a total hypothetical.
Surely they would sell, right? I know that I lack some of the context and deep historical ties here between those two clubs, but Liverpool, I feel like, are smart enough to know that, first of all, Manchester United aren't a real threat to us. Second of all, if someone's going to pay us 50 million for Darwin Nunez, we should probably take him. And by the way, I don't think Darwin Nunez is a bad player, necessarily. I think there's absolutely something there, and I think there's a world in which he's a very useful player for a large club. I just think that maybe a change of scenery could be useful for him. I think he's a sort of an awkward stylistic fit in a lot of ways. Remember back at Benfica, he was playing on the left side, and he's played in a few different spots for Liverpool, and he's just a strange player in a lot of ways. And I think maybe a reset for both club and player, especially if there's a large check involved for the club, probably does make sense here.
I think in an ideal world, Liverpool would keep Darwin Nunez so that you have that agent of chaos that we all love. When a game's maybe going against you and you just want to shake the snow globe, you put on Darwin Nunez, see what happens. But they also want the top-level, reliable number 9. So in a non-PSR world, that's what Liverpool would do. But the reality is they probably need to sell Nunez, regardless of what they kind of get for him. I don't actually know what his market value would be if he's not going to Saudi Arabia. They probably need to move him on to bring someone else in, and that seems to be the direction of travel and what they're looking to do.
And the name that I had read so far is Brighton's João Pedro, who I talked about way back when we previewed the Premier League season. He is this sort of flexible, fluid forward who's played a lot underneath a striker, a lot as part of a front two, can range a little bit wider. There's a profile there that I think fits what Liverpool have looked for in a lot of their attackers, where flexibility is something that they value. More than the analysis of João Pedro, I just think it's funny if this move actually does happen, and who knows if it will, right? This is very, very, very early summer transfer speculation. But I think it's fitting that Brighton go and assemble all of the talented players from other markets in the world, and they do really smart analytics-y things. And then Liverpool is the next tier up analytics club. Just go and buy from Brighton, and then you just have this cycle where Brighton are the feeder club for Liverpool, and everybody's doing smart things and everybody's making money. It feels like they've solved soccer.
It used to be Southampton, and then they bought all of Southampton's players, and now they
Who's
have
next,
to find a new
lads?
club to buy from. So
There it is.
Brighton it is. I think it is interesting, stealing from The Athletic, there was a good piece written about this. Just one quick quote. It was telling that during Jota's long absence from the league starting 11, that Slot largely opted to play Luis Diaz through the middle rather than the erratic Nunez. I think in 16 games without Jota, Nunez started 6 of those games, and it was like the first 4, and then they stopped starting him. So even as a depth option, even as a in case somebody gets hurt, break glass, it doesn't feel like that's a player that Slot truly trusts. So I think selling him on, if they can get a good amount of money to then reinvest into a striker who does fit what they need, probably makes some sense.
Just one final bit of context on this. Arne Slot is, Joe, you said it was notable that for a manager to call out a player twice, and I agree with that. Arne Slot's a little bit different in that regard. I don't know whether it's the Dutch thing. If you ask him about a player or why a player's not in the team, he'll tell you. And I remember the first game of the season, Jarrell Quansah gets hooked up at half-time. He's asked about it after the game. Normally a manager, top-level manager, will just give you some kind of softball answer back. He said he didn't win enough duels, he wasn't aggressive enough. Like, he told everyone the reason. He's done this with a few players over the course of the season. So it might not be quite as harsh as initially seems, because I think he's done it to several players in his squad this season.
Those crazy Dutch managers saying what they actually mean. What a world we live in. Darwin Nunez, by the way, his value on transfer mark, 65 million euros. I'm not sure what the actual fee would be in real life. Can I call it, Graham? Goes to Chelsea with a really big loan fee.
Oh, that feels about right, actually.
Is that entirely inspired by Fernando Torres?
It's just inspired by Chelsea in general.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. They'll also sign Liam Delap and Osimhen, and yeah, they'll. That's also inspired by Chelsea in general, collecting forwards.
All right, yeah. Finally on this one, if they are to recruit in his stead, any other advances on João Pedro? Anyone else they might be in the market for?
Gyökeres seems to be the one, or however you pronounce his name, from Sporting Club de Portugal, seems to be the one that Liverpool fans most want. And so I don't know if that means there's an actual connection there or if that's just wishful thinking, but he seems to be the name at the top of the list for many Liverpool fans.
Yeah, I mean, Osimhen as well. I mean, I'm just plucking names. I haven't seen any reporting. I'm not even sure if he'd be a great fit for Liverpool, but just in terms of like top level centre forwards, Osimhen's going to go somewhere surely next summer. So I don't know whether Liverpool would be in that queue.
He's going to Fenerbahce, controversial.
Sure.
All right, let's take one more quick break. When we come back, let's talk about the 49ers. It's 49ers, Graham, just to clarify, who are investing in a Scottish mega club that's sadly not Stirling Albion. And we're going to look back at the Copa del Rey and a mad game that happened this week you might have missed. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to the Bulletin. All right, let's head to Scotland, where the outline of a deal for Rangers to be taken over by a US investor group led by the 49ers Enterprises and their president Parag Marathe, excuse my pronunciation, looks like it's coming to be a thing, Graham. Rangers currently have a wide shareholder base comprised of 7 individuals. It looks like the 49ers ownership will be coming in and taking a majority ownership, as they have done with Leeds United as well. How's this one going down?
Yeah, so this one has accelerated, at least in the reporting over the last week. It now seems like The Athletic was reporting that it seems likely that a deal will be done by the summer, by June, and that would be for a controlling stake. As you mentioned, Ryan, the 49ers Enterprises, which is like the investment arm of the 49ers as a franchise. They already own Leeds United. They paid £170 million to buy Leeds United in 2023. I would imagine this deal will be for a lot less. Because it will only be a 51% stake, which will still be a controlling stake. They'll have control over Rangers, but also just the fact that Rangers are not worth as much on the open market as Leeds United. But nonetheless, I think this is a huge deal. It's a huge deal for Scottish football. It sounds like the 49ers have been looking for another club to buy. The reporting The Athletic had was that they've been looking around British football and European football, and Rangers is a cheap market opportunity. I haven't seen any numbers around there, but as I say, it's likely to be a lot less than the £170 million that they paid for Leeds. Rangers made losses of £17 million last year, which in English football terms is rather quaint, but in Scottish football terms, that's a huge amount of money. That can't continue. They're hemorrhaging cash right now. And it's a market opportunity because Scottish clubs just don't cost as much as English clubs. Leeds have access to the Premier League, Rangers don't, so that would be reflected in the price. There is a real upside, though, I think, to investing in Scottish football right now, particularly with a club like Rangers, where they don't have access to the Premier League, but they do have access to European football. If you win the title in Scotland, you're into the Champions League. It doesn't take as much money, clearly, to win the title in Scotland, to invest in those players and put in place the infrastructure. It doesn't cost nearly as much money to do that in Scotland as it does in the Premier League. So that's where the upside is. And also Rangers are a huge club in terms of their fan base. I think if you're not in Scotland, it's difficult to comprehend just how dominant Celtic and Rangers are in like daily life here, not just in terms of sporting life. They have millions of fans, not just in Scotland, but around the world. And it's only through decades of bad decisions and mismanagement that Rangers have ended up in this situation. And this has been going on for like a decade now with Rangers. If they were run properly, as you would hope the 49ers would be, they seem to be doing a decent job with Leeds. It looks like they're going up to the Premier League again this season. It is easy to see why investors would be interested in this opportunity.
Graham, one question for me. I've read that the debt issue, how much they had to pay this year and how unsustainable that is. At the same time, I also saw in a couple different opinion pieces the point that like this is a Rangers club that is in a much stronger position than they have been, certainly in recent history. The quote I saw, they're free from litigation, free of legacy issues for the first time in a decade. It's a cleaner club. Heavy investment has improved the infrastructure of the stadium and training ground. A multi-purpose event space, which houses a club museum, has also been built. So is it the case that they are hemorrhaging money but also in a better position? Like, are they in a better position relative to sinking and not existing anymore? Or are they actually in a good position?
To be honest, that's a question that I don't really have like a clear answer for. I think you can take it in a number of different directions. It's absolutely right in terms of the infrastructure. Rangers have invested a lot. They've got this new facility, Edmondson House, next to Ibrox, which looks brilliant. They're talking about expanding Ibrox. They've got a top-class training ground. That's not something that they're going to have to invest in. And you're right, Taylor. They don't have litigation. They don't have an HMRC case against them, which was something that dragged them down for a long time. Basically, the short history lesson on Rangers is that for decades under David Murray, the old owners, they spent beyond their means using this tax scheme. Ryan, you'll remember in the 90s, Rangers went out and got Gascoigne and Brian Laudrup and Mark Haitley. Like, these are genuine big stars. I think there was a point where, as unbelievable as this may sound, I think there was a point where Rangers had the biggest wage bill in world football, which obviously just wouldn't happen now. What was happening there was David Murray was using a tax scheme that basically hid a bunch of the money off the books. HMRC found out about this decades later, said, you owe us this much money. Rangers couldn't pay that amount of money. They went bankrupt. They went down to the bottom tier of Scottish football, where they were famously beaten by Stirling Albion. And so what has happened since Rangers have come back to the top flight of Scottish football is they have overextended themselves in a football sense to try and chase Celtic. They've spent money on players where really they didn't have the financial footing to do that. And where they made a real mistake, sorry, I know I'm going long on this.
No, keep going. This is good.
Where they made a real mistake was when they won. The impossible happened. Somehow they won a title under Steven Gerrard. Celtic collapsed. Rangers had a good season. They won the title under Steven Gerrard. They then, even more impossibly, made a Europa League final the following season. And they had all these assets that other clubs were interested in. Ryan Kent, Alfredo Morelos, Glenn Kamara, Borna Barisic. Realistically, they should have got £60 million plus for those players, which is just a huge amount of money. That's what Celtic do. They've just sold Kyogo, they sold Van Dijk, they sell Moussa Dembele, they reinvest that money, they go again. Rangers kept all those players, they all deteriorated, and they lost them all for free. So they got no money from any of those players, and now they're having to rebuild the squad while trying to keep up with Celtic, who have got the Champions League money coming in. As I mentioned, their transfer model works well. They have money coming in all the time from player sales. And so Rangers have just overextended themselves to the point where now they are spending themselves into the abyss. And that's why they need investment. They can't continue doing this.
And it does sound like those 7 shareholders Ryan mentioned, I think they own varying percentages, and they'll have to buy them out, so it has to get everybody on the same page. It does seem like that is the direction they are heading and will end up working. And I think it's a really smart acquisition for all the reasons Graham has mentioned. It's a cheaper acquisition. I think it's easier to do more with less in Scotland because Rangers have the status they do, and they are such a massive club in Scotland, in the UK, and elsewhere. And I think you have the huge expat fan base over here, where there's tons of supporter groups, and I think you can do a lot to promote like commercial growth and revenue from a U.S. market. I think the biggest thing for me, though, that I see in this is like multi-club ownership, and they own Leeds. Now they're going to own Rangers, and I think you're going to have a ton of players loaned out from Leeds to Rangers, and you will have opportunities for younger players to develop, or if they need a bit more, I don't know, physicality in their game to go play in Scotland and get a season under their belts. I think it's a really smart acquisition, and then you can link those two and have a sort of connection there that allows both teams to theoretically benefit.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Sorry to jump in.
No, you're good.
That's a really interesting point about multi-club ownership there, because until fairly recently, I'd say Scottish football fans were quite squeamish about multi-club ownership because, I mean, just by the nature of these groups, there's probably going to be an English team in that group, and English teams are more attractive, and Scottish football fans, like Rangers fans, would say they should be ahead of Leeds in the pecking order there. And in terms of the size of the club, like, can I kind of understand that point? That's just not the way modern football is now. Leeds are going to be ahead. So that fact that Leeds might be loaning young players to Rangers, like that's not a positive for Rangers fans. Like, they won't like that at all.
Not until they start helping them win games, that's for sure.
Yeah, well,
Right?
true.
It's an interesting thing, though, because I also saw a lot of Leeds supporters being frustrated by this because their argument was like, can you focus on getting us promoted and staying in the Premiership before you go out and buy another
They're
team
worried
and
about the
focus on them?
49ers. They're not worried about you. Like, calm down, Leeds United fans.
Yeah, right.
Like, let's get a little perspective here.
They're worried about lying to fantasy owners about Christian McCaffrey.
100%. He's going to be back next week. Don't worry. Like, he's going to be
no
back.
worries at all.
Yeah. Graham, I guess one more question for you on all this. We're talking about how Rangers is an interesting investment because the barrier to entry is lower than it is for a lot of other, not just soccer clubs, but a lot of other sporting entities, right? This is not just a multi-club ownership group, this is a multi-sport ownership group. There is also, though, a question here, if we all accept that rich people like to buy sports teams, which is kind of just how this goes. There's also the question, though, of, okay, you've climbed over the barrier to entry. How does this turn into a success for Rangers? Because I think this is a fascinating story. They are very much second fiddle in a league with two fiddles right now. In some ways, the floor is like pretty darn high because you're not going to finish lower than second in all likelihood unless Aberdeen managed to do an Aberdeen for a full season instead of doing
Aberdeen,
an actual Aberdeen. Yeah, the floor is fairly high. You can, over a fairly small sample size, even of a whole season, do what Rangers did under Gerrard, where you're talking about how they somehow win the title, they make a run in Europe, and that's all great. That's possible. But how likely, or how do you think this Rangers team tries to close that gap? Because from even what you said, sure, this doesn't cost as much for this group to buy into Rangers as it does to buy into Leeds. But also, it still seems like the way that you maximize this investment is so incredibly far off, given how much of an advantage Celtic have, and how relatively few teams from Scotland do actually make it into Europe in the first place.
Yeah, I think it has to be a long-term project for the 49ers where they have to look to Celtic and look at what Celtic have done with their transfer model. I was speaking to a friend about this. We were trying to think of who have Rangers bought in the last 10 years. They've bought them young, they've developed, they've then sold on for a big fee. We could only come up with one name, and it was Calvin Bassey, who now plays for Fulham. They sold him for big money to Ajax. He was the only player from that run to the Europa League final who they managed to sell on. They need to do more of that. Like, if you're a Scottish club, and this is something that Scottish clubs in general are having to do. That's why I was saying, until fairly recently, fans and clubs have been quite squeamish about multi-club ownership groups. It feels like the barrier has broken. The floodgates have opened. With Hibs are now part of Bill Foley's ownership group, who owns Bournemouth. They've had a few players on loan, and again, it's similar where like Hibs fans would say, well, in terms of the club, the size of the club, we should be above Bournemouth in terms of the pecking order, but it's just the reality of modern football. Is Bournemouth are they're the feeder team for Bournemouth. You also have Aberdeen, who I think this was a real talking point years ago. Their owner has links with Atlanta United. So Atlanta were sending players to Aberdeen, and of course we all know about like the prejudice of Scottish football fans towards MLS and American soccer. Like, did not like that at all. But then they started getting some good players, and so it was beneficial for Aberdeen. I think Hearts have a similar thing, not an American ownership group, but Brighton or Tony Bloom are trying to invest in Hearts at the moment. They're trying to put 10
Ryan
million
wants to
pounds
say
in
Orange
Hearts.
County so bad right now. I can see it on his face so badly.
Was it Darren Eales at Atlanta who's involved in?
Yes,
Aberdeen, is that right?
Yeah. Darren Eales had. I think he sat on the board. I think of Aberdeen at Darren Eales for a couple of seasons. So Orange County's partnership with Rangers, of course, has been so beneficial for Rangers having all that success over the last few years. But anyway, this is something. This is the direction of travel in Scottish football, and Rangers have to get on board. They have the benefit of having more resources than Hibs and Hearts. They can go into the transfer market at a higher level, even though they are hemorrhaging money. That's still something that will happen, and they have to look at how Celtic have built up that advantage over the last 10 years, and whether they like it or not, because Rangers don't really want to take any lessons from Celtic, they have to kind of follow their lead.
And you mentioned the direction of travel there, Graham. The direction of travel in European soccer in general is US ownership. I mean, look at Serie A with 9 of the teams are US majority owned. Even in Scotland itself, according to the Athletic, I saw that Dunfermline, Dundee United, Hibernian, St Johnstone all have US ownership. Of course, Waystar Royco famously, is it Hearts? They're
Is it Hearts or Hibs? Who knows?
It's one of them. But that is the way of the world. That is clearly what US investment companies see as an opportunity in Europe, not just continentally. But
yeah, and I mean, just to hit home the point about the like Tony Bloom, the Brighton owner, he's putting £10 million into Hearts. That's not even a player for Brighton, but that for Hearts that will make that could potentially, obviously need to invest that well. that can make a transformational difference for a club like Hearts. So the Scottish football is at such a low point financially and in a number of different ways that you can invest a little bit of money and get a lot, and that's why a lot of these investment groups are looking at these clubs.
Now, the interesting part of the arrangement also, Graham, is the conflict if Leeds and Rangers are in the same European competition, because technically by UEFA rules, the owners would have to relinquish their stake in one of the teams if they were to play together in the same competition for integrity reasons. However, there is a UEFA clause, famously, that allows your owner and Man City and the Red Bull teams and Man United and Nice to compete together. That clause is, just do it anyway.
Yeah, that initial clause you were talking about, Ryan, is completely worthless, because we see every season, like Manchester United, I think what they've landed on is they need to prove that different people are running the clubs, if that makes sense. So you can be part of the same ownership group, but a different staff is running Manchester United to the staff that's running Nice, or like the Salzburg and Leipzig Red Bull clubs. And I think that's how they'll get away with it. Yeah. But Leeds first need to get into European competition, which, hey, the way they're going right now, they're looking good, so that might not be far off.
Yeah, and this Rangers deal will be good for Farke's sake, for Daniel Farke's sake. Sorry, with the multi-club ownership, that could help the team as well. Couldn't resist. One more topic to cover in the bulletin. The Copa del Rey semi-final first legs took place this week. On Wednesday evening, Real Madrid had a 1-0 win over Real Sociedad, but the madness, Graham, of Barcelona 4, Atletico Madrid 4. We have a Slack chat, dear listener, and Graham, I think, has not stopped going on about this game since it's happened. Tell us how it unfolded.
Yeah, so I'll do a very quick beat on this because I've been talking for a long time and I feel like Joe is chomping at the bit here.
Let me try to tee this up even further. Was this the best game of the season so far?
I think so, yes.
I think it might be. All right, Graham, go. Because tell us why it was so good.
So just the craziest game of the season in terms of it swinging back and forth, because Atleti were 2-0 up after 6 minutes of this match. They were exposing Barca in the way that a lot of teams have been able to this season. They were getting in behind the Barcelona backline. A lot of good combination play between Alvarez and Griezmann, which I think at this point is probably the best front two in world football right now. They've merged so well over the course of the season. Then Barca pull it back to, well, initially 2-1, then 2-2, then it's 3-2. They're ahead by half time. Two of those goals came from set pieces. By the way, the Inigo Martinez, the delivery from Rafinha for that third goal is just incredible. I guess you could argue about the marking, but there's such whip on that ball, it's going to be really difficult to defend even if there is a player there. And obviously that's a weird flipping of the script where that's meant to be one of Atleti's strengths, is from set pieces, but Barcelona scored 2 goals. Lewandowski makes it 4-2. At that point, Barcelona looked to be cruising, only for Atleti to score 2 more goals in the last 6 minutes, the equaliser in stoppage time. And now I can't wait for the second leg, which will be played in Czech's notes, April. Thanks for that, RAFEF. Wow, great scheduling there. But Joe, it sounds like you enjoyed this one as well.
Yeah, this game ruled, first of all. It's funny, Graham, because you talk about Atleti getting in behind the Barca back line, throughout this game. It's weird because their first goal that they score is off a set piece. Then the second goal that they score is just a straight-up counterattack where Antoine Griezmann gets the ball on that right side. And then it's the Barcelona show for quite a bit after that.
They dominate for a huge portion.
They did. They absolutely did. Barcelona are one of the most dangerous attacking teams on the planet. They are also an extremely chaotic team because they play this very high-risk, high-reward style that has turned into high reward more often than getting punished from all that risk throughout this season. Given that they are on top of the table in La Liga, they're still alive in the Champions League with a real shot to make it to the final 8 of that competition. It's worked out for Barcelona this year, and it wasn't really coming back to bite them in this game, that high line that we've talked about before. They show it, 5-6 seconds into this match off the opening kickoff. The back line is all almost already to the center circle, which you just don't see. But they were clawing their way back into this game slowly, despite Atleti having that game state advantage. Atletico Madrid as a team, they're built to play with a lead under Diego Simeone, right? Think about what happens when Atleti get a lead. They can sit back and defend and try to attack on the break. They love that mid-block. They love transition. And as I mentioned, that's where the second goal comes from for Atleti. The game was absolutely in their favor. Up 2-0, 6 minutes in. Game state is in their favor. Everything was in their favor. Barcelona are just really, really, really good. They score 4 unanswered goals, up 4-2, and then chaos happens. Atleti, Taylor, Graham, you already talked about how they pull this game back. It is the 93rd minute equalizer that was the big story. And I think Henry Bushnell put up on Blue Sky just a screenshot of Barcelona's back line and Atletico Madrid racing in behind it onside. And all he put in the caption was 4-3, 93rd minute, something like that. And this is how Barcelona are defending. It's It's wild. Like, Barcelona are the most watchable team in Europe by a huge margin in my mind. They're silky smooth on the ball. They still manage to find ways to blow big games. They check every box that I'm looking for along the way. I love it. I love the high line. I don't think it should go away, if only for my entertainment. And clearly because it is working. This second leg in, as Graham said, checks notes, April, bummer, Champions League. We have you to thank for that. I'm stoked, man. Barcelona are just so watchable. It is wild to me how watchable they are.
I can't figure out why they've done this massive gap between the first and second legs. Like the Italian Coppa Italia, we had the second. We've had a round of that this past week as well. They didn't need to split legs. I suppose there was only a single game elimination in their round this week, to be fair. But madness! Why take the momentum away at this point when you got 4-4 hanging in the air for over a month?
So Barcelona's schedule is Sociedad on Sunday, Champions League against Benfica on Wednesday, Osasuna on Saturday, Benfica the following Tuesday, Atletico Madrid the following weekend, Espanyol in what's called, Graham, what is the Copa Catalunya? Is that a thing that I'm supposed to know about? Apparently that's on their schedule for March 19th, another midweek game.
I don't think they play a first team in those games.
Okay, that tracks. Google is deceiving me. I think the point is, Rafael Varane was right. There's too much soccer all along. I don't know. That is the obvious takeaway here. I loved this game so much. It was so much fun to get to watch Pedri conduct that midfield. I enjoy that Dani Olmo, Pedri, Frankie de Jong midfield. I'm not really sure that Frankie de Jong is all that good at this point, but I enjoy those three players working together. Jules Koundé pushing forward from right back and getting really involved.
He's having a great season, by the way.
He is having a great season.
He's become a player that I didn't think he would become, because he starts out as a centre-back, and initially when he moves to right-back, he looks uncomfortable. And for whatever reason this season, he has become like Dani Alves reincarnated in a soccer sense, not in other ways.
And it's wild, good save. It's wild because somehow I definitely get the sense that it helps that he's playing with a literal child, and that child's name is Lamine Yamal on that right side, because Yamal is so good and plays him into space so well throughout this game and all throughout this season. Koundé has more of a stay-at-home right back, but absolutely does have the license to overlap. Those two players seem to have such a good understanding of each other, and then you had Ferran Torres up top as the 9 to start this game, and I think that's actually worked out fairly well for Barcelona when Lewandowski has needed the rest, because there is no true natural number 9 in this team. It just fits together, and the offside trap makes this team even more fun. Bill Connolly, who works for ESPN, posted this graphic. I don't know if anybody else saw it. It was up on Blue Sky, and it was this picture of Barcelona and their offside. So it was this chart where it is offsides drawn as the scale from left to right, and Barcelona are maxing out the graph all the way at 140 offsides drawn. The next closest team, does anybody want to guess the next closest team, either where they are numerically or who the team is?
Villa would be my guess.
Great guess. Very, very close. Villa looked to be just about 70, 72 offsides. Parma is apparently the next closest team. Okay. They're just under 90 offsides drawn. And I assume this is in league play, so Barcelona will have even more of this. Barcelona are at 140 and Parma are just under 90 offsides drawn. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. Nobody's doing what they do. And I think this was maybe the highest profile, this did not work for us moment, in the way that them drawing Kylian Mbappe offside 8 times or whatever it was back in October was is Hansi Flick a genius? The reality is probably closer to he's a genius than he's a fool. But man, when it turns out to not work, it is just great.
Wow. Were you actually expecting one of us to come up with Parma there, Joe?
I don't know, Ryan, you're the Serie A guy. You tell me. I assume you know the in-depth tactical approaches of all these teams. No, I wasn't. Not really. Graham's Villa guess was really close, though. I think Brighton are third behind, and then Villa might be fourth, Graham. So you did really well there. Also, I do want to go back. Now, I've been talking for a while. I want to go back to Graham calling Griezmann and Alvarez the best front two in the world. That's like saying if some team started playing with a back six, like they're automatically the best team in the world at playing a back six, because nobody else plays a front two anymore. They are
That's
great.
A fair point.
They are.
Who else does it? I can't think of anyone else who really does it.
No, me. I was trying to think while you were talking, Graham, and I came up mostly empty at the highest level.
Of their midfielders, Szoboszlai and I'm not having Szoboszlai and Curtis Jones as the best front two in world football, but who knows, I guess.
Oh, that's because Griezmann and Alvarez exist, Graham.
Yeah, true.
There you go. It's them and whoever Palmer have got up top at this point, I would say, is the nomination. So obviously in La Liga, we've got 1 point separating the top three. Barcelona on top, Real Madrid equal on points, but up behind on goal differential, and Atleti in third. Who's the best team in Spain right now?
Oh, who knows? Honestly, like, this is the best title race. This is the best. I've always had a thing for Spanish football. I covered it for Eurosport for a number of years, and even back when I was like growing up, Revista de la Liga on Sky Sports, Ryan, you might remember, was like my first. It was the first show that introduced me to like a foreign league, and so I've always kind of been interested in Spanish football. This is kind of unprecedented. I can't recall a title race like this. I mean, there's still time, I guess, for one team to accelerate away, and it becomes a bit of a damp squib. I don't feel like that's going to happen because over the course of the season, we've seen Barcelona being top. All three, I think, have been top at various points of the season. And what makes this title race so great is all three teams are excellent at what they are good at. They all have flaws, big flaws, and they'll drop points to not just amongst themselves either, but to other teams in La Liga as well. So, yeah, I can't wait to see how it pans out.
There we go. Exciting times in Spain. Guys, we've bulletined. Let's wrap this one up here. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your bulletining.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Thank you very much, Joe Lowry. Pleasure as always, my good man.
Thanks, Ryan.
And thank you, Graham Ruthven.
Thanks, Ryan Bailey.
Listener, thank you very much for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye.